Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Talking Niagara this morning, Tuesday, February 4th. And I think we can almost kind of say that we're going to be talking purely about tariffs today because 20 in what a change in 24 hours, eh? Um, Basically, there's been a whole heap of things going on. Stock market took a tumble because of the tariff situation, and uh, Trudeau was on the phone with Trump, and Polyev has a 7 point plan. There we go.
Yes, but you know, I want I gotta in a way I gotta thank Trump here. Like this isn't over by any means.
Yeah,
He's only postponed him for uh, a month, and these were the initial tariffs that they were going to put on to force the Canadians and Mexicans to be more serious about the border. But his real tariff study is due in April. And that's the one that I am really worried about because Lutnick really is trying to design tariffs on Canada to force industries in Canadian industries into the United States, and that's the tariff war that I'm really worried about.
yeah, that's one of the things that I listened to the Pierre Polyev speech, and that Pierre Polyev speech made one of the points was about we need to be moving away from an American only dependency on our foreign markets.
Yeah, in a way, Trump's done us a big favor. He can actually he can actually call it a victory. And the reason why he can is because he's got us hopping and jumping
Yeah,
through hoops.
yeah.
But on one hand, as long as the tariffs stay off, I have to sort of congratulate him a bit because he got us working on stuff we should have been doing many
Yeah.
years ago.
Oh yeah, the border issue is something that's a big issue. We've been letting in, it's not so much about who's on the American border, who's crossing the American border. I don't think that's as big an issue. Although, putting planes up there makes a big show of it. Where the big issue comes is in the people getting into Canada from abroad, other places.
Yeah, as Polyev pointed out, and what I'll point out too, what are Canada's problems? Canada's problems are China, illegals, and drugs.
Yeah,
And Polyev added on our side illegal guns. 85% of the gun violence that happens in Canada, criminal action, happens with guns
from
imported to
America.
the United States.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
have in the United States right now, they have lost track of anywhere between 250 to 625,000 guns that they don't know where are. So
Yeah,
uh, the illegal guns floating around there, whose people who has everybody's lost track of, is uh, enormous. So there is a boundless amount of guns that are available to come into Canada from the United States. That's been one of my biggest issues, all in all. And I think what Trump has done basically is to make his folks focus on realities. Remember when the Trudeau government wanted to make a lot of guns illegal,
yeah,
or in Canada, right? And we're cutting into people's hunting rifles and so on.
yeah.
When the real problem was, and that was going to cost, I don't know,
The
600,
illegal weapons. Yeah,
and the real problem for gun violence in Canada was guns coming into Canada from the United States, illegal guns.
yeah.
And he wanted to make sure that handguns were not uh, they took away the criminal element of having a gun in uh, in a crime or having the illegal crime, because that was an uh, that was a deterrent to having a gun. That if you had a gun in a crime or not, well, in a crime, basically, you had a minimum sentence right away for having an illegal gun. And they took that away because in their wokish minds, they thought, well, handguns are disproportionately used by people of color. So it would be prejudice to put too much pain on any criminal that had a gun, because most of them would most likely be people of color, which was the stupidest thing ever.
Yeah.
And he was Trudeau initially was very averse to putting handguns on that list of guns that should be illegal for the same reason. He really missed a point here, because people of color don't want people having guns either.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and putting it that way, I hate the term people of color, but yeah, that's exactly it. You know, there is, and I don't think there's a person in Canada, a right thinking person in Canada, that agrees with the need to have weapons.
No,
weapons here. Yeah.
Just because they show up in immigrant populations,
yeah,
more than they do. Well, that's always been the case, basically. You know, people coming into the country, there is an element, a criminal element that, particularly illegals, that
focuses on
make
that
the rest of the people look bad.
Yeah, there's a criminal element that focuses on those kind of people, the people who are down, who are here illegally because they need to be able to earn themselves a living in order to stay, right?
Yeah. And they seem to not want to talk about things like the Somali immigrants are the ones that are running the heroin trade. Well,
so Paul Lemire called you a gazelle yesterday.
Yeah. Well, it was more a rhino and gazelle clothing, basically. When I had to get up and get my phone, and it was close to the stand where Paul had his camera, and he says you got to be like nimble as a gazelle, and I think that was very humorous, because one of my nicknames is Rhino Man.
Now that I get.
I got it.
Knowing you, yeah, and I believe it's probably a wrestling thing. Yes.
Well, I had other names when I was a wrestler, but it happened when I was in Libya, because of course, it's very hot there, and you're wearing shorts all the time.
Yeah.
And somebody looked at me and he said, so Mother Nature messed up somewhere in Africa. A rhinoceros has a couple of human legs because Wheeler got his legs.
I get it. Knowing you, I get it. Yeah, I get it. Okay, so the net link is the Starlink deal is intact. American booze will stay in the LCBO for now. And now the trade war is delayed by at least 30 days. But you're right. It's actually, we need to be worrying about what happens in the April pack that his czar brings up. Lutnick brings up.
Now they come up with a deal, and we're gonna have a fentanyl czar, and we're going to coordinate with the Americans much more, and I hope so, because the stuff that comes from the United States, like guns and that, like if they can help us stop that flow, that would be great.
Yeah.
Already, even before this, just not America. Like, for instance, the New York State governor has beefed up their border patrols and everything. So, I have a grudging thank you to give to Trump, because he's got us hopping. He's got us doing what we should be doing.
Well, we should have been doing some of the border stuff ages ago anyway. We've been very lax on the border. And the fact that, for example, we were talking about that earlier in the week. About sorry, last week we were talking about the patrols looking out for those boats ferrying people across.
Yeah. So this is going to be a continuous problem, and let's face it, our problem is going to be greater than the Americans, because Trump's throwing everybody out of the U.S. right now, all the bad guys, which is kind of good. So and he's actually getting it done, and that you can't take that away from him. All these criminals that should have been thrown out of the United States a long time ago, and even have deportation orders on them, are just wandering around, staying in the States. So he's gone after them in a huge way. I will say, though, that he will stop when it comes to illegals on farms, because even though they have a guest worker program like we have here, the greedy farmers down in the United States can get don't even have to do the guest worker thing. They can use illegals, and they can make a lot more money using illegals, and that's going to cut in the profit margins of both Republicans and Democrats. So and reduce the amount of cheap farm supplies products coming out. So he'll probably stop there, but the most of the ones he wants are the ones that go into the cities and the rural areas, and that's by and large the most of them. But okay,
one of the things that I want to actually talk about is one of the things Poilievre was talking about yesterday was we need to truly make sure that we have free trade within Canada by knocking down any interprovincial barriers to help replace the north-south trade with east-west trade and make it us self-reliant upon our own produce, right? That's a key factor from my concern. Is like, how can you have, obviously if I go into Quebec and I buy dozens of Quebec items, including cheeses, etc., they're not fussed about me bringing back a few items for my own use, or even if I sell something to you as a friend, right? They're not concerned about that, but they are concerned about big business moving across, the provincial borders.
Yeah, Poilievre points out that we trade more with the United States than we do with each other.
Yes.
And the trade barriers between different provinces actually make that stupid, and why we haven't been able to solve that. Now, once Poilievre comes up with it, the government claims, "Oh, we're already working on it. We've done." Well, no, I've heard that forever. And
working on it.
No government has really done anything.
We're working on it when you've been in power for what?
9 years.
Yeah, 9 years. Yeah. Working on it, even low priority stuff would have at least had some attention in a 9-year period.
Yeah. So the ineptness of Canadian priorities, federal Canadian priorities, are just dumb. And now we see that our oil and our gas and everything is really much in a big demand around the world. There will be a reduced demand for these things over the years, but we want our share.
But we also need to start
demand.
Yeah, we also need to start looking at different international partners, not just the USA. All right.
We could have been making a pant load of money if we had put up LNG stations and exported our to Europe right now, because they're at odds with Russia. As a matter of fact, the German prime minister, when he came to Canada, asked if Canada could supply LNG, but we had stalled all those things because of environmental considerations and so on. We didn't want the federal government, in its infinite wisdom, wanted to reduce the amount of oil and gas we made because it's environmentally friendly, which put us on the back foot when it came to being able to losing markets in Europe and other places of the world. This just is a more realistic approach to to recognize climate change and to reduce our dependencies on carbon fuels. However, there is a market for it out there, and it makes no sense when you reduce your footprint in that shrinking market. Like, seriously, uh, if you don't produce it, somebody else will.
Yeah.
And that's what I don't think the feds really get. So we'll see. Poilievre's had some pretty good ideas, pretty much the same ones that the liberals and the premiers have had. Basically, is targeted tariffs. But we got a 1 month reprieve, and I have to say that grudgingly, I have to say to Trump, thank you for getting us hopping and getting us concerned with it. This
Well,
will make us stronger, and it will reduce the amount of drugs coming back. And fentanyl does come into Canada. The ingredients does come in through Vancouver. It's probably the only place it does come in. And but there was 44,000 pounds of fentanyl captured coming in from Canada last year, and 21,000 pounds came from Mexico. So there's less than 1% coming from Canada. But nevertheless, that 1% is dangerous.
yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
it is probably, and we don't know how much of it is consumed. Now, heroin, cocaine, and other drugs come into Canada mostly from the United States. So if we can say, okay, we'll help you with the fentanyl, and you can help us with the other stuff.
Okay, so one thing I wanted to very quickly touch on, the S&P 500 went down 0.8% yesterday, Dow went down 0.3%, and the NASDAQ went down 1.2%, right? So there was a reaction by the stock market on these, and essentially the S&P was briefly down 2% before it dropped, and the Dow dropped as many as 650 points.
Yeah, that was now that was the rattling of Wall Street,
Yeah.
and
earlier European markets have been very edgy as well.
yeah, it's really shaken things up, and particularly the trade between Mexico, Canada, and the U.S., because that could really send ripple effects across the world. And that's one of the things I think that motivated Trump to reduce postpone the tariffs. I think he probably was going to keep them in just to shake things up, but he decided not to go ahead with them for the moment because of what had happened in the markets. And at least one senator, or it was a senator or congressman, Grassley, a Republican from Iowa, asked publicly for a carve out for his farmers in Iowa because they are dependent on potash and other fertilizers that come from Canada.
Yeah.
What Trump does not want to look like is someone who victimized farmers because of this tariff. So if you have one Republican asking for carve out in public, you're going to find a lot of them talking behind the
In
scenes.
private, yeah. Oh,
Trump
yeah.
also claimed that he didn't know one of the reasons why he went ahead with the announcement for the tariffs, because no one had let him know about the $1.3 billion defense spending that we came up with in Canada. We immediately announced $1.3 billion more into border defense and border patrols. And he said he wasn't made aware of that. The people who are running that part of the government neglected to tell him that part of it. So he seemed to be surprised that we had already jumped up and done what he had asked. Now, if the tariffs stay off, I'm going to have
But
to.
remember this: we may have spent more. We put some extra in defence, and last year that Trudeau announced the buying of those jets. But of course, the time for buying the jet to actually getting the jet and getting them in action is probably a 5-year lag.
Well, the fact is, the Conservatives already had inked that deal,
I know.
and Trudeau tore it up,
Yeah.
and then he got all excited and started it all up again. That's just simply,
Well, that's a part of that. That's a part of the whole thing about, and Trump was right about us underspending on our NATO commitment, right?
yeah, and
2% GDP, two
that's
percent
another
of GDP is not massive.
that's another favor he's done
Yeah,
for us. We keep wishy-washing on defense, and our armed forces are suffering for it. They took the Trudeau government took $1 billion out of the defense budget and gave it to the Ukrainians. In other words, not
yeah.
giving the Ukrainians $1 billion and bolstering our own defenses, which just doesn't make sense at all. So, in a way, I have to congratulate Trump for getting us going, doing the
So
things we should have been doing all along. And it's kind of an embarrassment to me that a foreign leader is the
and
one
kick
that,
us in the
that
teeth to get it done. Yeah, I know. I welcome our American viewers, some American viewers as well. Nancy is here from Cleveland. Morning, Nancy.
hi Nancy, how's it going?
Right. And okay. So then the other question is, of course, we need to think about is like tariff crisis highlights a need for Niagara to diversify its industry. All right. I've been saying this for quite some time. I've been saying that we need to diversify our industry. Looking at industry that is just purely like tourism and things that deal with the US, US trade has always been a problem. We need to have industry that is unique and special to Niagara. What that is, I'm not sure, but you know where I'm coming from.
Well, basically, the pundits here have been talking about we have our eggs in one basket type of thing.
Yeah,
We are so heavily reliant
we are.
on American trade, and that's our fault. We have always gone the easy way, and we see that these treaties that we have signed are not etched in stone. Trump came after us for the NAFTA agreement and then changed it, which is another illogical thing. Like Trump says, the trade imbalance is very bad, and the United States is being taken advantage of by Mexico and Canada, and yet the deal that we use
It's
is
Trump's
the
deal.
deal that
Yeah,
he came up with,
yeah, exactly.
and all of a sudden it's no good. What was his deal? And he claimed that it was the best trade deal ever, and
Yeah,
it was the
yeah.
best for American interests. And yet now he's trying to say, well, no, that's not the case after all. Somehow the Canadians have found a way of disadvantaging the Americans. I don't think so. Particularly when you look at the trade imbalance, the United States has a huge trade surplus with us in everything except oil. That's the only thing that we make money on, that we have a surplus on, and that oil is then taken to refineries, and they make a lot of money off that oil. And that was one of Poilievre's points in an earlier statement that, yeah, they're making a lot of money refining our crude when we should be doing a lot of that right here, and then we could have made even more money off our
Well,
own.
the point about one of the things Poilievre was talking about in his plan yesterday was the need to actually diversify who we trade with.
Well, that's being said over and over again.
Same products, different markets.
Yeah, when we find that the trade agreement that we have, hello, Millie Jane. I haven't seen her before. Anyway, so welcome to the show. One of the things that, like I've said before, over and over again, that one thing I've heard all the time, ever since I was a teen, that Canada has to diversify its market. We are way too U.S. dependent, but we're lazy. It's hard to go out there and start making trade deals and so on when you got an American market right there. So it's easy just to do that. And the fact that we can't clean up our interprovincial trade is another thing why we're so lazy.
Yeah.
We are the laziest nation on earth when it comes to trade. Look at the United States; they diversify all over the world, right? Another thing Polyev says is the lobbyists in corporate lobbyists in Ottawa are working against Canadian industrial interests and taking Canadian dollars and putting them into Brazil and China. That was one of the big problems. All in all, the local industries here were sort of wrapping up and taking themselves to China.
Well, that's been one of the...
CCW moved from Welland to China. And it wasn't because they were losing money. It's just that they were going to make more in China. And they took people from Canada and took them to China to show them what the things we were doing. And I mean, seriously. And then China uses unfair trade practices to sell that stuff right back to us.
Yeah. Well, the worst of this is that we did this, and we did it with all the best of intentions, 20, 30 years ago. The intention was that, hey, if we can utilize a country like China as being a manufacturer, we don't have to do the manufacturing. We can do the more intelligent things. We can do the designing, the prototyping, be the higher end of the food chain, if you like. But that backfired on them, because now China's actually, essentially you put all of the designs of the world into China. What do you think was going to happen? Of course, they came up with and said, oh, if we add a piece of this and a piece of this together, we can make something else entirely different, So the Chinese are now at the forefront of technology and design.
Sure, because one of the conditions for people bringing industry to China was they had to open up their books and show them the manufacturing processes. They so they had to give away their secrets, so to speak. And that was just for massive money for individuals, and of course it has had a consequence. Now, the unfair Chinese, like I said before, we have the same problems as the United States. We have China, illegals, and drugs. Those are the three big things we share, and we should be unified against China, illegals, and drugs.
You know what's bothered me the most when I was looking at those tariff chart on Saturday was his initial opening shot was 25% Mexico, 25% Canada, and 10% China. What's the deal? What deal has been done with China? He's been talking about Chinese. He was talking about 100% tariffs on Chinese cars. And if he was talking about 100%,
that was Biden. That was Biden.
Was it Biden? Okay. Yeah. If we were talking about, higher tariffs for the Chinese, why did we not, follow through with that? I'm sure he was talking about tariffs on the Chinese as well.
Well, he didn't make it any higher because his buddy must be Walmart. They must have contributed to his campaign. I make a joke, of course, but because there was already a 10% tariff on Chinese stuff, and if they put another 10%, remember, China is an enormous economy. It's not like Canada and Mexico. The United States would hands down win a trade war between Canada and Mexico at the same time. It would just have to make sure it lasted as long as it could. But the problem is it would bring pain to the American consumer as well as destroying ours.
Yeah.
But it but he can't do that with China, because China can really upset the apple cart in its trade with the United States. It can shut off a whole lot of things
Yeah.
that come, and the United States has now become reliant on cheap products from the United States, shoes, T-shirts, you name it. And not only that, but Chinese companies that work in, like we say, okay, we'll get them from Vietnam instead, or get them from the Philippines or whatever. The Chinese companies are the ones that operate those
Yeah.
companies.
Well, exactly. And the worst about, had we gone to the Philippines or Bangladesh or something to have made those products in the first place, we would have been investing in those nations and developing the processes that were needed at the time, right?
Well, you have to, because like places like Bangladesh and Philippines, they can offer very cheap labor
We could have
for
controlled that.
to get the trade, and as long as they uh, obey the ordinary trade rules, that's just fine. That's trade.
The trouble is,
You get something and you give it away. So the Chinese thing is a much different though. It's because
but again, what is happening?
manipulate the trade rules, and they don't float their yuan and all of the things. And the West put up with that because it felt that it would be a good thing if China were to enter the world markets and become part of the family of nations. And this would reduce tensions. However, it's made China very rich and increased the tensions. You got to remember, too, the Chinese own a lot of the debt, the American debt. They bailed out the United States in the 2008 crash. And the reason why they did it is because they needed the United States.
Well, they were already 20 years into being US's primary manufacturer.
Yeah, they had already got First Nation statuses in trade. That was
exactly.
Deng Xiaoping, I think he did. He was the guy that did that.
The whole point about that was exactly why they needed to do that. And Karen's right that we learned during COVID that we're too dependent upon China. And the whole point is that had those jobs gone to, let's say, Bangladesh or Thailand or other places like that instead of China, we would have been in control, but we would have had to have, we would have gotten the same products that we get now from the same places as we get now, but we would have been in control of that trade, not the Chinese. The Chinese basically sub everything out to Bangladesh and Thailand and places like that. And,
the vast majority of it
we would likely have used.
Well, look, we made some blunders there, but do remember that China treated us terribly when we were holding Huawei executive here, that the United States wanted us to extradite to the United States, and we were obliged to do that by the agreements we have with the United States. Pretty typical agreements that are found all around the world. Well, Chinese then started to punish us and humiliate us, and what Trump did is he wanted to punish us and humiliate us. Boy, it's pretty tough being a smaller a secondary power when the big guys like China can slap you around, and your neighbor to the south can slap you around. The problem with being slapped around by the United States is we're supposed to be pals with them, buddies. We have been for over 200 years. The longest independent border.
Honestly, the best thing we could have done was just escort her to the border and just left her at the border, left her to walk across the border. Had a registered post.
We have to remember too that the two Michaels that the Chinese were holding, it was the United States that got them out for us.
Yeah, I know.
So you know, we couldn't do it. They just snub us. So we have to look at the realities here. We are a smaller power, and we're going to have to really find ways of defending ourselves and be less reliant on China and the United States. But I will sort of take my hat off to Trump as much as I dislike the man. He's got us hopping. He's got us talking about breaking down interprovincial barriers. He's got us jumping on the border to make sure that remember, Canada's biggest interest is not the immigrants coming from Canada into the United States that we should be really worried as much about as the mobs of migrants we can expect coming from the United States up here. And there's another point too that they made that is very, very relevant. That because of Canadians' very poor immigration and visa system, really bad actors, politically bad actors, you know, the the Taliban type, the ISIS type, and that are more likely to go from Canada in the United States. That's more likely their entry point into the United States rather than Mexico. Although we don't know how many get through Mexico because it's if you've got enough money, you can get in through Mexico very easily, but it takes money. So their point is that Canada's very lax visa system has allowed some very bad actors, and we found that to be true here, didn't we? We found that there was a red flag ISIS guy came into Canada and he beat the immigration system, even though they were after him, because there was no tools by which the RCMP and the immigration department could use because there was gaps in law. So we had this guy was in and he started to plan murderous things in Canada.
Yeah.
We do also notice that one ISIS guy came in, a young fella, and he was going to go down. He had plans to go down to New York City and murder Jewish people. And we caught him before he did that. But how the hell did he get in our country?
Yeah, those two people shouldn't have been in our country. The sort of people that should be in our country are the people who are peace loving and want to make sure that their children get a better life than they do, irrespective of what their religion is.
Hippies only. Peace, brother.
Peace, brother. Yeah. Hippies only. Well,
yeah,
I'm not a hippie, never been.
We have this convoluted idea too about our diversification of immigrants coming into the country without properly screening them, and it seems almost like you'd be accused of racism if you screen
if you screen a white person, it's fair, but if you screen a non-white person, that's being racist.
Well, yeah, but the screening process should be equal, just like everything else.
Exactly. And the screening process should be the same, irrespective of who you are, where you're from. Right? Okay. So let's move on quickly to a few other things. Okay. So Niagara's jail is dysfunctional and a mess, and overcrowded and understaffed.
Well, this is all focused because a young man died there in 2018.
Yeah,
and I've known a couple of guys that have been in, over the years, a few guys that have been in the Niagara Detention Center, and it's drugs go in there frequently as they claim. And this young man died in 2018, and finally they're coming to conclusions on that case. It's overcrowded, it's understaffed, and it's a violent place. This is the Niagara Detention Center, which is a medium security facility, and yet there are no guys are not being rehabilitated in there at all. I mean, they live there like they live in the streets. Basically, there's drugs, there's violence,
Yeah.
in all of this. And this young man, we can't really determine what happened to him because there was an ample amount of drugs there. It was a cocaine. Was it a cocaine fentanyl mix that killed him? How was cocaine in that volume available in there?
Yeah.
Um,
You know, the thing was, I was when I, you know, as people know that I used to do work as a taxi driver many years ago, about 10 years ago, and about 10 years ago, well, actually less than 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, 11, 12 years ago, one of the things that I got back in like 2010 was a job picking up somebody at the jail who was on weekend in prison. You know, so they worked during the week and they spent Friday night, Saturday night and Sunday night in jail.
well,
right?
that's part of the problem because the weekend jailbirds bring the stuff in. They're the constant supply.
Possibly, yeah.
They
But
are.
this individual, but this individual, I said, "What? So what's it like in there?" And he said, "Dysfunctional, overcrowded, and understaffed."
Yes, really. I a couple of millwrights I know had done
Yeah,
time in there, and one of them was scared for his life. He was a little guy, so he was scared for his life the whole time he was there.
yeah.
And another guy was a bigger, stronger guy, just shaked his head. Now he was in there because he was rude to the judge. So the judge threw him in jail for in Thorold for a couple of weeks because he was a jerk in court. He didn't need
You
to
mean
go
you
there.
mean he would
He
have
will
had?
never go back. Believe me, he'll be as polite as you please with any judge.
So if he'd have been polite to the judge, he'd have got a suspended sentence. But because he wasn't, he got slung in prison. Oh dear.
No, he got slung in jail for contempt. He
Yeah.
wouldn't have got put in jail for this for the other minor thing that
Crime.
he did.
Yeah.
You know, but he was such a jerk and he just lipped off to the judge and the judge says,
One thing.
I'll put you in jail for all right, you're in jail for contempt for a week. And he says, and then he told the judge to F off, and the judge says, okay, you want 2 weeks,
2
you get 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's typical. You know, so the crime he committed, you know, the crime he originally was accused of wouldn't have landed him in jail, but the crime, but contempt does. You see, you know, you see where it comes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a pretty frightening thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I just have to tell you that I'll probably have any minute now. My door might ring. I got servicemen coming in today, so
Yeah. All right. And I think we're almost done anyway, because I was going to say where we lead from there is Ford has his biggest lead since the turn of the has the biggest lead since the turn of the century in polls right now.
Yeah, for over 100 years.
Yeah, that might have changed in the last 24 hours.
I don't think so because look, Ford make a big deal about you have to have a strong mandate in order to face up to Trump and his tariffs, and it turns out that that's not that important to the Ontario voter, but most of the other things that are important to the Ontario voter, the conservative Ford government gets the biggest points.
Yeah.
And let's face it, who is he right now? He's talked strong. He's stood up. He's been very vocal. He is the guy that's like a vocal against the tariffs. He's been a strong leader there. He's gone down to the United States and talked on U.S. TV. Made our case down there. He's been very vocal. He's been more of a leader than the federal or other premiers.
Yeah. And actually prepared to turn the switch off on to US power on Sunday night at 6:30.
Yeah, and so he stood up for Ontario. He stood up for Canada, and
Well,
he's a
he's
premier
got
that's getting stuff done. Things are
yeah, he's
getting
got
built in
50%.
Ontario.
Based upon latest polling, is at 50% of the poll right now, with the Conservatives on 24, Liberals on 24, and NDP on 20.
Well, he's had a whole lot of scandals and a whole lot of blunders in his first term in office, and sort of overcome that a bit.
Yeah,
And particularly environmental, and where the developments come, and how he was pretty much betrayed by the developers when he started opening up some
Greenbelt. Yeah,
controversial land for development. So he's learned the hard way in a lot of things.
yeah,
But
yes.
no matter what you think about him, he has started getting stuff done. There are more car plants. There are more roads being built. More all
Well,
these things that are
he's done a
improving.
lot of deals. He's done a lot of deals for manufacturing. Absolutely, he has. Right.
So I think that's one of the big reasons. The other reason, of course, is the other two leaders for the time being are weak and unknown. Uh, Crombie should be a name that comes up because the family has had a lot of political experience and the name is well known, but she hasn't really been able to get ahead very much in the polls. And the NDP has really not done much. They
Well,
really haven't been vocal enough. They haven't come forward enough. People don't know them. And right now, who do you got to vote for?
yeah. And the irony here is that while PC are at 50% with the Liberals at 24 and the NDP at 20, it's possibility that you may actually get more NDP MPPs than you get Liberal MPPs.
And it looks like he's a bit of a political genius in a way, where he's going to look that way, because he's most a lot of leaders risk a backlash for calling a snap election. People generally don't like snap elections. It
It was
looks
a
like
bet.
this is not going to affect him that way, and as a matter of fact, he's going to strengthen his position in the Ontario Parliament.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Other polls, by the way, are not quite as high. Doug's in about 46 to 48%. Bonnie Crombie's at 26%. So 24, 26 is about the same. 19, 20 for Merritt Stiles. And Mike Schreiner he's polling higher as a leader than, considering the Green Party is not that it's never really been that popular in Ontario.
Well, it's had a lot of growing problems. If you look at the federal Green Party, and
Yeah, but the federal Green Party has won most of its power outside of Ontario.
yeah, but they've come across as a very woke type party, and that's very unfortunate. They've left they've left behind their one main issue, which is environment, and got a lot of very wokish uh, 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 type issues, which is very unfortunate. Uh, they're they're meddling in all kinds of things. They were, if you remember, I don't know, they have this woke and very sort of weak sort of thing. They should just really concentrate on the environment and not talk about like, for instance, in the federal election, uh, they had to hold hands when they brought in a new leader who was mixed race and gay, right? And the last leader
Well,
before that was yeah.
nothing wrong with a mixed race or gay person, but typically putting them in a leadership position in a political party would tend to ostracize that party to some extent.
Well, the problem is that they're not looking for a leader on merit. They're looking for a leader on what they look like and symbolize. you want a leader of merit. Doesn't matter if
Yeah.
it's a Martian, a green Martian. It doesn't matter. Look, we had Kathleen Wynne as an Ontario premier, who is a gay woman. She had outed as a gay woman long ago. Nobody seemed to care. She
Yeah.
won. She won elections. She ran the province for a long time. It doesn't
What
really
people
matter
care,
to the average
what
Canadian.
people cared about ultimately with Kathleen Wynne was that she was she spent too much, overspent the budget massively. That's
Well,
that's
yeah,
what
that
brought
was
it
not
down.
my point, though. Yeah, we
Yeah.
could like
Yeah, but exactly, it shouldn't matter as to what she is, right? As to whether she's gay or straight, doesn't matter. It really doesn't.
yeah, but it seems to be a very important to the Green Party to do this kind of that's why they can't leave Elizabeth May, like she wanted to retire
Yeah.
as the party leader, but they can't because uh, she's the only one that's vocal and respected because they don't. And this whole idea of merit, you want somebody that can do the job, not look like the part, you know.
And and realistically, I don't expect the Greens to get more than about 1 or 2 seats here in Ontario anyway.
No, because they keep, as I said before, they keep leaving aside their primary issue, and that is environment. If they stuck with environment and the effects of the environment and how industry and the environment can get along as best they can, how a road can be built and where it should be built, instead of just
And
saying, no, 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 the road can't be built here, you
yeah,
know.
and to be quite honest, if there had been instead of Marit Stiles a traditional working class leader of the NDP like a Wayne Gates, I think you would have had a few more sparks flying in this election.
Maybe. I think Wayne Gates is going to win the election again here. And
He probably will. He probably will. Although I don't. Well, I don't anticipate any real change in this riding.
no, Wayne Gates is
Some new players,
popularity
maybe.
may because Ford's popularity is so great. Wayne Gates might lose some just on ideological uh, sort of issues, but unfortunately, Ruth Ann Newstag, although she's very popular, she was the third most popular, or at least got the most votes, third most votes of anyone in council. I don't think she's got enough to.
She hasn't got enough to unseat Wayne Gates. I don't think. No, I
Yeah,
would tend to agree.
if she had more time
Yeah,
to develop, uh, but this quick election will help Wayne uh, in this particular case because he's a well-established candidate that everybody knows and most people like. So she doesn't. I don't think she's got enough time to challenge his incumbency.
yeah, and we've already talked about Bonnie Crombie anyway. Um, because I think the Liberals are still suffering from still suffering. They're not really
And they've never been.
rebuilt their base.
Well, that was the real problem with the McGuinty Wynne years. They
Yeah,
ran the province for I don't know what 18 years or something like
something
that.
like that. Yeah, yeah,
So McGuinty, the liberal McGuinty, and then the liberal Wynne ran the province for quite a while. But as Wynne has pointed out and admitted, she didn't step down fast enough, and she
yeah,
Trudeau had that same problem. He
yeah.
put the party in a
Well,
really bad place.
I've been talking to a number of people about both conservatives and liberals about Trudeau stepping down, and there was a liberal said to me that basically there were noises in the party back in 2023, August September 23, that he should move aside, and there was a lot of chatter about that time. And that's about when I think he should have moved aside.
Quite right, but when you're surrounded by sycophants
Yeah,
and and they're going to tell you what you want to hear. And Kathleen Wynne pointed that out, that how difficult it is for a premier to step down when you have all kinds of voices around you saying that you can do it. You get a
Yeah.
blurred vision of the reality out there.
Well, and then I also have to ask the question: is there a time after this election when the Conservatives are in the lead that Doug Ford steps down and puts somebody else takes the reins?
Not as long as he keeps winning elections like he's about to win now. He could stay there too, and
Yeah,
uh, he
but I
may
think
he may stay in power for a very long time, because the most prosperous times that Ontario has ever had are under the Conservatives. They ran the province for 48 years in a row before Peterson unseated them back in the 90s. People remember those prosperous times, and the unusual thing is that the Conservatives are winning over the young people. They are turning their back on the progressives because they don't see any money in the progressives. Basically, they see lack of housing, lack of jobs, lack of initiative, lack of planning,
yeah,
and so they're voting more on practical lines rather than ideological lines.
yeah, right.
Anyway, I won't be voting for Dougie, but I do admit some. Trump has done more for our borders than Trudeau has in 9 years. Yeah, definitely. I grudging appreciation of what he does, depending on what he does next, though. If he still wants to weaken the Canadian economy, as him and Lutnick have said they wanted to do, whether they do that or not, I don't know. That that isn't good for us. But up until now, not only has Trump got us uh, focused in on our border and ostensibly making the country safer, that we have now a fentanyl czar to zoom in on fentanyl. We've lost 47,000 people to fentanyl deaths.
Yeah.
And as Polyev has pointed out, which was needless. Well, now we're zeroing in on these drugs because of Trump. And why couldn't we have done it ourselves? We should have been able to do it ourselves. But
Okay.
Trump's lit a fire under us.
Yeah. Okay. So Randy and Chipper are saying a liar is a liar, and it's time for Merritt Stiles and the NDP. There you go. All right, so we got people. We got and that's what I like about this show is we've got a mix of views, and we welcome a mix of views, and we try to we try to bash each side equally, really, and praise each side when they do good.
Yes. Yeah.
It's why I said I think right now. The Liberals will probably get less seats than the NDP.
Oh. Oh, I made a mistake. I got the wrong day. My plumber guy's coming tomorrow, not today.
All right, but we should
So,
be wrapping up now anyway.
yeah. So basically, and like I have to bite my tongue, but I like what Trump's done for us is made us focus in on our economy.
He
He's made
has.
us focus in on our border. He's made us focus in on our pathetic immigration policies, and all these things we should have been able to take care of
Oh yeah,
ourselves, but we didn't. He lights a fire under us. All of a sudden, we
we
got
do it.
border
Yeah,
security. We got people zooming in. Fentanyl czar, specifically shooting for fentanyl. Why didn't we do that before? We have
yeah,
a porous border, particularly in the port of Vancouver, where for the ingredients of fentanyl are coming in. Why couldn't we have done this before? It's humiliating to me that a foreign leader says, smarten up, get your act together, and we jump.
yeah.
And he did it with threats. I didn't have to do it with threats, in my view, but
No, sometimes it's the only way.
but it's humiliating to me. Why couldn't we do it ourselves?
Yeah.
Why?
All right. it's time to say goodbye anyway.
Anyway, without further ado, I bid you adieu. Peace, everyone.